Going live?
We go live.
Hi, welcome to our first YouTube Live with Foodscaping Utah. If you don't know me, I'm John. Holly's behind the camera. She's going to help with questions. If anybody has questions at any time, just let us know. If you haven't found it yet, there should be like a comment place. Is that where they do questions?
It's a live chat.
Okay, a live chat. So you put questions in there if you want. What we're going to do is talk about first benefits of drip irrigation, and then we're going to show kind of hands-on. You guys can't be here, but via live, we're going to show hands-on how to put it in. Originally, this event, we were going to have it be a workshop where you could do it, but in light of COVID-19, we're going to do it on live. With the jet, I'll come closer. Hopefully the mic's okay. The things you want to be thinking about are what are the benefits of drip irrigation, and then how you can use drip irrigation to water vegetables and raised beds like we have here, or how you could use it for fruit trees or grapes, and then how you might want to convert from a sprinkler system. These are the things to think about, and then also if you wanted to go straight from a hose spigot, how you would put that in. If there's time at the end and there's interest and you guys want to ask questions, we can also talk about timers and setting those up a little bit, and how you might want to water your foodscape. Those questions are a little bit more technical because there's so many factors that go into it. It really depends on what your soil is, what plants you're growing, if you're in a raised bed or not. So we'll save that for the end. But first, let's go ahead and talk about the advantages of drip irrigation. So,
You got a thumbs up on the sound. They can hear you.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. So, with drip irrigation, the first benefit is that you're watering only right where your plants are. You can get it right into their root zone. So we're going to lay it, like if you can see this bed over here, where these strawberries, these have tomatoes in it, and we're putting the drip irrigation just right there. And if you compare that to what we call overhead irrigation or sprinklers, you get a lot of spray in areas that you don't necessarily have plants or roots. So you have overspray. And then the other big thing, the biggest advantage of drip irrigation is that it's a lot more efficient. So drip irrigation is 50 to 70% more efficient than sprinklers. And that's because when you think about sprinklers, and if you're joining us from Utah, you know here it gets really hot and dry, right? So imagine a summer day in July, and if you're shooting sprinklers into the air and it's hot and dry and it's sunny, you lose a lot of water to evaporation. So with drip, you've got it right on the root zone, you don't have any spray, and it waters a lot more slowly. So it's more efficient in that it can get water down deep into the roots without losing any of it. So that's the main advantage of drip. Anything else on that?
And then it's less weeds, right? Because you're watering just your plants.
That's a really good point. So if you have like mulched areas around it, and then instead of spraying everywhere, you can keep the water right where you want it. Weeds will grow less if you don't water them, right? So you put the drip right where you want, and then you don't let the weeds in. Okay, so should we move to installing into a bed? Okay, so this is a brand new vegetable bed that we just put together. The soil's down a little bit because what we did here is we planted potatoes, and then we're going to add soil and kind of raise it up. As the potatoes grow, we'll add a little bit more soil to get a little bit more soil depth. So I've got most of these put together, but this is a product made by Netafim, and what we have is a roll here. Hopefully you can see this. Am I coming towards the camera? So this is a 1/2-inch strip line, and this is made by Netafim. And the product that we like in raised beds has pre-built-in emitters every 12 inches, okay? And these are set up, they're pressure regulated. Here comes another pass. And it only waters 0.9 gallons per hour, okay? Per each emitter. So it's set up really nice because when you lay it in, you don't have to add individual drippers everywhere that you want to water. You just lay out the line, fill the whole space, and then water that way, okay? Depending on what your context is, they have different products that have more spacing, 18 inches, 24 inches. In raised beds, we like every 12 inches, and we like 0.9 gallons per hour. If anybody has a question, more detail on that, go ahead and you can ask that anytime. But in the meantime, I'll show you how to put it together. So this line comes from one of our sprinkler valves and comes into this area where we already had vegetables before.
And that does not have emitters.
Yes, good point. So we have two lines here. One's the drip line, and the other is the, I don't know what you call it, supply line, supply or main line. It doesn't have emitters in it. This is also a 1/2 inch. And then what you need is a whole bunch of fittings to put it together. So like step one would be to get, draw kind of a plan, like a map. Draw a plan or a map, okay? And then lay it all out and count how many fittings you want, and then get like 10 extra. Because you always want to have extra supplies. And if you can manage to install drip irrigation or any sprinkler system or anything without going to the sprinkler supply store like 6 times, then that's the way to do it.
Can you see those a little closer?
Yeah, yeah. So these are also made by Netafim, but this is a T, right? And you basically just push the line into it, okay? So there's T's, there's elbows, and then there's what's called couplings, which are a straight one. I think I've got one. So here, these are called couplings, if you can see that. But basically, you would use that to push 2 lines together. So if you wanted to go from the supply line to the drip line, that's what you could do, okay? So here then, we're coming in, and I put a T on the bottom of my bed, okay? And then this is a shutoff valve. And that's totally optional. You can do a shutoff valve if you want to. But we like to have a shutoff valve on each bed just in case we want to water one bed and not the other. Like in this case, we've already watered these tomatoes a few times, and we haven't even we did plant the potatoes earlier this week, but they haven't come up yet. So it's nice to have a shutoff valve for each bed. So I put that right when it comes in, and then I like to have it on the outside of the bed. If you don't have a shutoff valve, you could easily work it on the inside, just dig underneath a little, have it come, and then you wouldn't have it here at all. So then I have an elbow to come over, and this is a T, okay? And one thing with drip that can make it a challenge is connecting the fittings sometimes. So I'm gonna do one now, we'll see how hard it is. Okay, so I kind of wiggled and pushed together and wiggled. You could also twist. There's a lot of different ways. But we're lucky right now. I don't know, what is it, 70 degrees? Mm-hmm. It's under 70, but it's a sunny day. If you can do it on a sunny day, do it on a sunny day, because I tell you from a lot of experience, it's really a pain when the fittings don't go in easily. And if it's cold and cloudy, the line is a lot harder to work with. So just while we're talking about putting them together, a couple tips on that. If you do find yourself in a situation where you need to connect the line and it's too cold and cloudy, you can use hot water, like boil some water and dip the line in it. I've actually used a hair dryer before. A little bit of soapy water is another tip. If you have other ideas, you can throw one in the comments. There's a lot of different tricks maybe to get that going, but the best one I think is lay the line out in the concrete on a hot sunny day, and then it's going to be sweaty because it'll be hot that day, but do it that day as opposed to a different day. So we connected that one, and here then for this bed is, let's see, 33 inches wide, okay? And I'm only going to do 2 lines, okay? But you'll notice in this vegetable bed, it's actually, I think, 3.5 feet wide. I did 3 lines. So a rule of thumb for raised beds is you want, if it's below 3 feet are more narrow than 3 feet, then do 2 lines. Or obviously, like here, I don't know if you can see this one real quick. Those are only 15 inches, so there's only 1 line there. If it's 3 feet up to just under 4 feet, then use 3 lines. And then if it's over 4, 4. And then with vegetable beds, we don't advise going over 4 just because it makes it hard to reach the middle of the bed. But generally, if you think about every 12 inches, there's an emitter, then you also want to space your lines roughly 12 inches apart. And what you get is a perfect grid of emitters. Every 12 inches this way, every 12 inches that way. And you might not need that much water. I mean, it kind of depends on what you're growing, but our philosophy in putting drip in raised beds and growing in raised beds in the first place is that we want to use every single inch of space. We got perfect soil in there, or we try to, right? We strive for that. And then we don't want to have some areas not getting as much water as the others. So a grid makes it totally even. Okay, so a couple things while we're putting this together.
So
here,
basically
go ahead.
Basically what you did is you took your elbows and put them in and laid all the pieces out before you start putting it together.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So I kind of draw up a plan depending on how big the bed is, and then count all the fittings, and then I actually, before I cut any of the line, I come out and I lay right where each fitting is going to go. And then that way I can find out if I need to make another trip to this irrigation supply, right? So here we have a T because it comes in 1 and then it makes a corner, okay? And then on that end, we have 2 elbows because we did a closed loop where the water will go down and come back, okay? Let me show you this and then we can talk about that in a little bit more. Here on this corner, I put a T, and that's because this corner is the lowest spot of the bed, the lowest corner, elevation-wise. And the reason we do that is we're gonna put, so that we can drain it in the winter. You could put an elbow here and then hopefully it would drain out this way, but I really don't want to damage these. If there was a lot of water in there and they froze, you could damage them. Otherwise, we just leave them there indefinitely, like years they'll last. So what we'll do here real quick to finish that idea is we'll connect this one, just like, it's kind of wiggly, right? See how I did that? Mm-hmm. Okay, and then this is called a figure 8, but it's a shutoff valve. So when we start up the system, we're going to leave it open so that it can blow water out.
Just in case we got dirt in there.
Just because to clean it out, right? Yeah, in case there's dirt in there. And then, so you got a figure 8 here, T, elbow to come in, right? And then what we'll do is after we blow it out, all the water, we'll close it like this, and then we can irrigate all season. And then at the end of the season, we'll open this up, and so that the water can drain out of there, okay?
So you want to do that on every bed that you have?
So, I am not an irrigation specialist, but I don't want there to be any damage. So I put one of those typically on every bed, yes. However, you'll notice I've done a closed loop, what I called it, right? Mm-hmm. And to save yourself some parts, if you want, let's say you only wanted to do 1 vegetable bed, as opposed to a closed loop where the water goes down, goes in an elbow, and then can come back and loop like that, mm-hmm. You can just do 1 of these at the end of each line. Remember to put those on the low elevation side of the bed, mm-hmm. Okay? But because this vegetable valve or this timer zone has so much on it, I prefer to do closed loops because you can end up getting, you can go further with the same amount of pressure and have more drippers on it with a closed loop. But if you only have 1 bed, let's say you got a 3-foot wide bed, do 3 lines and then just put these on each of them. That'll save you some money, and then you just open all 3 of them at the end of the season. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so another, when you're getting your supply list together, the other thing you want if we can find them, is way more than you think you might need of these. They're called drip line staples, or they're stakes basically, because when you're laying it out, it's really nice to be able to secure it right where you want. After a while, you can take some of the stakes out when the line is warm and is used to its pattern, but when you get it like this, it's really hard to lay it out, right? It's in a coil and it wants to stay bent. So, let me show you real quick. You see that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We'll just put a couple stakes in. To make sure. This is going to be a little funky right here because we haven't filled the soil up. Obviously we'll move the lines up higher once we fill the rest of the bed.
So you're not going to bury them in there?
No, but that brings up a good question. This line, you can leave it on the surface, you can bury it, you can pull it, usually we have it on the surface just so I can make sure all the emitters are working. But there's people that just leave it in for years and years, even buried or covered under a thick layer of mulch. And that's fine. So I'm going to put, I don't know if you can still see me, but I'm going to put one more here. And that actually looks pretty good. So we got our drips connected and laid. It takes some time to connect them and to cut them, so give yourself a while.
What do you use to cut them?
Oh, yeah, good question. So, for years, until this year, in fact, I used one of these ratchets, but this is for cutting PVC, okay? This year I bought one of these, and that works, but this is a little bit nicer. It's a cutter, I think it was like $15. We can move on to how we're gonna get the water to the bed. Okay. Hopefully you have a pretty good idea how you might want to lay it out in a vegetable bed. But the next question is, let's say you have an existing area.
We do have one question.
Okay.
About the staples going in. Some people have trouble with them popping right back out.
Kind of like this one did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any tips on that? More staples?
More staples, yeah.
Sometimes.
This one is like that because we put cardboard underneath. So you could take a hammer and tap it in more, but yeah, I think more
in
staples.
The loose soil. You could put like something heavy on the line till it gets straightened out, right?
Yeah, in fact, I ran out of staples when I was putting this one in, and I just put big rocks on it. But so, like, say you had one that was popping out, you could cover it temporarily with a rock. I don't have a better tip than that.
But then
if anybody does, let us know. What's that?
And then it flattens, right?
Yeah, and then it flattens, and you don't have to worry about it too much. That's the other thing with this. If you need to stretch it further, then you would do that later. Okay. So the next thing would be getting the water to the bed, right? So let's start with, let's say you have an existing sprinkler system and you want to convert to drip irrigation. So there's a couple ways to do that, but the easiest and the best, if you just wanted to put maybe one vegetable bed in or two, is this cool new kit. And when we first started using drip irrigation, I don't think these even existed, but this is a 1800 retrofit by Rainbird. So just to recap, we use Netafim drip line, okay? But this is a Rainbird retrofit kit. They have drip supplies too. So it's cool. Now we got a helicopter. The adventures of life, right? It's gonna be an adventure. So, can you see me okay?
Yeah.
So this is a retrofit kit, right? And what makes it nice, for drip, it's really important that you filter the water really well. And this is especially important if you're on secondary water. We use Pine View watering system. It's out of the reservoir, and when it comes, it has quite a bit of dirt in it. So our main irrigation system, it's called secondary water, right? But it's our irrigation water. When it comes in, it has one big filter on it, but then we put a special kind of finer filter on each drip zone. Okay, so you only need one extra if you only do one zone, but now we have in the front and back foodscape, so we've got a lot of different zones. So what you need for that is a pressure regulator and a filter, right? So this is a cool retrofit kit because it has a pressure regulator and a filter right built in, and you can put it right where you had a sprinkler, right? So in that case, you would take your sprinkler out. You want to try to show it?
That. Yeah, I think so.
All right. We're not sure if the camera's going to work. Here we go. So here we got a sprinkler, right? And what we can do there is just screw this out. And then we'll put on the retrofit kit, right? It would work, but I'm going to cap ours, sorry. And then here, can't get back down there, RDO. Here then, you screw this on, and then your drip line goes right onto that, okay?
Okay, so hold it back down there. So that goes
So
on
this
the
would be
sprinkler
here,
line.
like that.
And do they connect automatically? Sometimes you have to have a connector, right?
An adapter. This sprinkler, I think these are called 1800s. Yeah, Rainbird 1800. Has 1/2 inch thread right here, and this will go right into that. I think they also sell one that has a 3/4 inch, but if not, you could get this one and then do an adapter. It would be 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch.
So before you run to the sprinkler supply, you might want to look at your...
I would dig up your sprinkler even, pull it out and see. I mean, if you're sure you have an 1800 Rainbird, then you would know that it's the 1/2 inch one. But I like to dig them out and make sure I have all the supplies. So in our case, we're not going to put that on there because we're going to tap into the existing valve that we already have.
Okay.
So, but since we don't want to water this ugly, terrible grass in this area that the weeds are moving in, we're going to foodscape it instead, right? What we'll do is we'll cap our sprinkler, okay? So this is just a 1/2 inch cap. In our case, we're going to put that on. Okay, so let's say you have 3 or 4 sprinklers on your sprinkler zone. Let's see if we can get back over here. What I would do then is the ideal situation would be to put one of those retrofit kits on one of the sprinkler heads that's closest to wherever you're going to water, right? And then cap the other sprinklers, right? You don't need a retrofit kit on each one. If you wanted to do 2, so it's a loop, right? So say you had sprinkler, 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 sprinkler. You could do one on this end and one on this end, cap the ones in the middle, and then the water would go underneath and loop the whole way. We've never felt the need to do that. The reason I'm mentioning it is the filters will clog. If you have 2 filters on there, that might be better than 1, okay?
They're pretty easy to clean out, it looks like.
They're really easy to clean out. Like, I don't know if you saw that, but
Every spring you want to come out.
every spring for sure. You know, I didn't do it last fall, so I did it this spring. And then maybe if you notice your pressure is starting to go down, like some of the emitters water aren't coming out, then check the filter, and maybe you need to clean it in midsummer or by the fall too. So you just take it out and rinse it under water, and you could use like a toothbrush or something. Okay. Okay, so that's how you would go from a sprinkler. Or one other thing, if you have a sprinkler valve like this one, you could put this. I mean, a sprinkler zone is going to have a sprinkler valve, right?
And that's going to be in your like box underground.
Yeah, I didn't want to take you over to our sprinkler box, but if you have one of these, you're familiar with it. Instead of tying into where a sprinkler was, you could put a pressure regulator and filter right at the valve, okay? So this would screw right into here, okay? And then you could go to drip line right from here. And in fact, if you have an area that has 0 irrigation, I would get a sprinkler valve and you wanted to get serious about foodscaping and you wanted to put a drip in a whole big area, I would put a sprinkler valve that you can control with a sprinkler timer and tie right in right here and then run drip line the whole way. This 1/2 inch line can go for, I mean, you'd have to look up the specifics. I don't know them off the top of my head, but it can go for 500 feet, let's say. Yeah, I mean, it can go a long ways. So you don't have to worry about getting 3/4 to it. You can. You'd have to do the math and research on that. But this is a little bit more heavy duty filter. Like you might not have to clean it up as often. Okay, clean it out. So then the quickest, easiest way to get into drip would be to go from a hose or from a hose bib, right? So let's move on to that. The way I would do that, especially if you're in a really dry climate like here in Utah, would be to get a timer. This is a battery operated timer. Some of them are solar. We've gone through quite a few timers, so we've got various types. This is made by Dig. In our experience, they wear out pretty fast, like a year or two. This one is made by, I think it's Orbit, right? Yeah, Orbit. The reason I like this one particularly is it has 2 valves on it, so you can program 2 zones on this. They also have one that just has 1 valve that's a little cheaper. The reason you might want 2 zones is if you wanted to water, and so say you converted a whole grass area to foodscape, you might want to water your vegetables on a different irrigation schedule from your fruit trees and grapes. We can get more into details at the end, but the vegetables need water more frequently, right? Okay, so you would need one of those, and then you would get a converter. The book will say that you need a backflow preventer, so look that up. You can put a backflow preventer on so that the water doesn't go back into your hose spigot, okay? And then you still need the pressure regulator and a filter, so that would screw right on, okay? You need an adapter here. This is hose to, what's this called? PVC thread, right? And I think I have one of those, yeah. So this is hose to PVC. So you put that on there, right? And then you can either put this directly onto your hose bib or your hose spigot, I like to call it, or you can have a hose that runs out to where your bed is, leave it there and screw right in there. Put that adapter on, and then you put your pressure regulator and filter.
You need one on each valve, pressure regulator and filter.
That's a good question. Actually, we've successfully put the pressure regulator and filter here before the timer. So yeah, that way you only need one. The disadvantage there would be you might have to change your filter more often because more water's going through it. Then, let's see. So by the time you come out, you know, you got, as you can see, we've done this a lot, so we have a million adapters. You end up with adapters, right? And then that's a hose one, see? So then you eventually want to get to one of these, which is a threaded end, okay? This is pipe thread, okay? And this is a drip fitting. So you would screw that in when you get the right adapter. You get the idea. This comes in 3/4 inch or in 1/2 inch. So you would adapt to pipe thread, screw that in, and then you put your drip line, you know, right onto that. So we've covered from a sprinkler, from a hose bib, and the next thing we were going to do is talk about how to water. So, right, or is there one other thing in there? Timers. It really depends on your climate. It depends on a lot of factors how you water, right? But here in Utah, it's really nice to have a timer. But the disadvantage of that is it makes it easy to set your timer and then forget about it, right? Really the best practice in water would be to water when the plants need water, right? When the soil's dry, that's when you want to irrigate, and that can be a little bit complicated. So we could get a little bit into the details, but really my top tip before we do that is the best way to know when and how frequently to water is to check the soil, okay? Because with different soil types, it's going to be so much different. And if you're in a raised bed or if you're in ground, and we do both of those, and they're on different schedules. So we have a moisture meter around here, but I didn't remember to bring it for the class. But you can get like a 12-inch moisture meter, and they're like $10, $12. You stick it into the soil, okay, and then it'll tell you when it's wet or dry. But you can be just as successful with touching the soil. So with your fingers, like when you're first getting used to it, it might be a little bit hard to tell. But you can dig down a little bit and see how far or if it's dry, if it needs water or not. So generally, the tendency is to water too frequently and too shallowly. Okay, so I'll give a little more specifics on that. If you, or the tendency is to kind of plant something and totally forget about it, right? But we're going to assume that you want to love your plants, and some people call it over-loving them, right? You give them too much water. So, what I mean by shallowly is a short run time on your timer. Okay, with a drip, it might only percolate down 1 inch or 2 inches if you don't run the valve long enough. So let's say you only did it for 5 minutes, but you did it every day. That would probably be too frequently and too shallowly. So a general tip is most people tend to do that, whereas it's better for the plants if you water less frequently and more deeply. Does that make sense?
So longer run time.
Longer run time and less often. So when the plants are first getting established, they might need water every day, but that happens in anywhere from a couple days to a week for most plants. Like if you plant vegetable transplants, you want them to have plenty of water while they're getting established. But after that, you want to start backing off, because what happens is the surface of the soil dries out first, right? And the moisture is down further. So what that tells the plant to do is send its roots further down. If you water every day and not deep enough, like not a long enough run time, the roots might just stay in the top and the plant might not be quite as healthy. Okay, so maybe we don't have time to go through a whole bunch of detail on soil, but just know and look it up. Try to figure out what kind of soil you have. If it has a lot of clay, if it has a lot of sand, that can affect your watering drastically. Okay, so in raised beds, you do need to water fairly frequently, because the advantage of them is the drainage is so good. But for example, in our raised beds for vegetables in May and into early June, we really only need to water twice a week, once a week. But by July, when the plants are really big, they're losing a lot of moisture, the air is really dry and sunny, and even if there's wind that can affect it, you need to water more frequently. So sometimes in July, we're almost watering every day, never twice a day, but we could get up to every day depending on the soil moisture. To check your run time, one more thing on that, on your timer, run it when you first get it set up, and then have the soil fairly dry, and then make sure that you run it long enough for the soil to penetrate 6 inches down.
And then you'll know.
And then you'll know about how long your run time is.
About how long do we run on?
Most, I don't know what the statistic is, maybe 70% of the roots are in the top 6 inches. So if it's a fruit tree, you want to go maybe deeper, 6 to 12 inches, okay? But that can give you kind of an idea of how long you want to run the timer for how deep it percolates. If it's clay, right, the water spreads out a lot more as it goes. If it's sand, it drains really fast. Raised beds also tend to drain really fast and straight down. Okay.
So we run ours for how long? In like July, if we're running it every day?
Yeah, every day for about 40 minutes in a 12-inch high raised bed with a lot of organic matter in the soil.
And what time of day is best?
what time of day. Really, the beauty of drip irrigation is it can be anytime. We water either in the morning or like early in the morning or in the evening. But if you had sprinklers, you would really want to avoid the middle of the day because you get a lot more evaporation.
This person asked morning or evening, but so it doesn't matter.
We do the morning. That gives the so it doesn't matter too much because you're not getting the soil very wet or the surface of the soil you're not getting very wet or the leaves of the plants, right? That's another advantage of drip irrigation that I mentioned at the beginning. You tend to have fewer diseases. If you spray your fruit tree or your tomatoes with water, secondary water particularly, or chlorinated water, not rainwater, in other words, you can have a lot of moisture on and humidity on the leaves, and that can promote diseases. So drip is great for that. So if you've had trouble with diseases, consider drip for sure.
So early morning, like 6 a.m.
5, 6.
It's a great time.
We have a lot of zones, so we start at 5. We do one at 5, one at 6, one at 7, that kind of thing in the morning, and then we also have one 8 p.m. I think. But yeah, some more general guidelines, really quick on watering. The vegetables in July, we might get up to every single day. This is in fairly tall raised beds. It would be less frequently in ground beds, okay, or with clay soil, for example. But to compare that for our situation, just to have an example, in our 12-inch raised beds, it's every day almost in July, depends, right? If there's rain or something, then there's a break. And then fruit trees, it's every 7 days, so every week. But it might be 7 to 10. If it's a new fruit tree and you just planted it, you probably want twice a week. Because the roots haven't gone as far. But this is the same kind of thing where you ideally are watering less frequently but longer run times. And a run time on a fruit tree timer for us is going to be 2 to 3 hours actually. So we want the water to go deeper, but then only once a week. Okay?
Cool. You want to talk about a little bit because obviously if you have a fruit tree, you're not going to put these long Netafim drip lines in, right?
So if you think of questions while you're going, but we'll do 2 more things. One is I'll talk about what you would do for fruit trees and grapes, try to make that brief. But then the other thing I wanted to do is turn on the system, so you can see it work. But with the fruit trees, now you can use the Netafim project. You want to walk up there?
If you want to.
Okay. Let me grab some things. With the fruit trees, so you can see we've got fruit trees back here. Instead of using the line that has the emitters pre-drilled, pre-set up, what we do, can you still see okay?
I think so.
Is here's a line, and I do both. You can put this 1/4 inch line and stab a hole into your supply line and run it out and put a drip emitter on the end. Okay.
I don't know if I can see that very well.
Okay, this is a 1 gallon per hour drip emitter. This one's actually made by Rainbird. Okay. Or, I don't know if you can see this too. You can turn down.
Yeah, I got it.
There's a drip emitter right on the line. So that's pretty cool.
So you use what to poke a hole?
So this is I don't know what they call it, right? But it's a hole poker. So it's actually, if you don't have this tool, it's a nightmare. Know that one from experience too. You just poke a hole in it, okay, and then add an emitter, okay? So these are 1 gallon per hour emitters, but they make them in different, 2 gallons per hour, 3 gallons per hour. Honestly, I like 1 gallon per hour for everything. And then if I want 5 gallons per hour on a tree, I just add more of them and spread them out more. So generally, as the tree gets bigger, and if you want it to get bigger, you would want to add more emitters further away from the trunk of the tree. You want most of the water out at the drip line. So as the trees get bigger, I'm adding the 1/4 inch and putting another emitter further away. But I don't take the other ones out. Another way to do it would be a grid with the pre-built, and then that is always customizable too. You can add an emitter to the 1/4 inch to the drip line with the emitters built in.
Cool.
Okay, So that's how you would do that. We're carrying a tripod around, so I think it's working pretty good.
Yeah. Well, you can't see it.
Well, I can't see it, that's true.
Alright.
Okay, so last thing then, two more things real quick. I know I said last thing already once, right? What we'll do is we'll turn it on, and I actually can control it with my phone, you know, because I'm a geek like that. It actually isn't that expensive. Orbit makes a irrigation timer called, I think it's Beehive, is that right? Okay. And you can replace yours to be able to connect it to your phone. And the state of Utah, if you happen to be in Utah, which most of you probably are, the state will give you a $50 rebate on it, and then instead of a $100 or $120 irrigation timer, it's only be 50 or 70, right? So that might be a good way, and it's a smart timer, so you can control with your phone. So we're going to turn it on, just kind of see what happens. Yeah, probably don't want to shoot water all of this. Remember, when we turn it on, we're going to leave this open to blow out this new line in case some dirt got in while we were doing it. Let's see if it works.
So the beauty of putting it with your already existing sprinkler system is you can control it with your sprinkler.
Right. All right, so we're gonna let some water go out, and then we're just gonna turn that off. I don't know if you could hear it, you know, depending on the sound. But you can kind of hear the pressure build in the emitters, and then now the water's coming out if you want to see that. Okay, so it worked. Yay.
Let's see. Do the built-in emitters clog? Mine sometimes have a salty white buildup on them.
They usually do not. I think it's key to have the extra filter on there. So if you don't have the extra filter, maybe look into putting one of those on. Sometimes they do, and I think the Rainbird emitters are pretty good. I don't know if Netafim makes emitters.
Pre-drilled, we're talking about.
Oh, with the pre-drilled. You know, if they do clog, you can add one of the 1 gallon per hour emitters. That's probably what I would do. And then if you make a mistake, one other thing to mention, when you're poking the hole, there's what's called Goof Plugs. You can fix it, or if you have to, you can cut out your hole and put a coupling in, a straight coupling. So
but if
that's
somebody's pre-drilled lines are clogging, you could try cleaning out your filter,
definitely
taking the end off and blowing water through, right?
Yeah, you can blow the water out, clean your filter, and then if it's still clogged, you could put one of the emitters on. That would be like the way I would attack it. Yeah, if the question was, can you add emitters to the pre-drilled lines? You certainly can, and this is fully customizable. You could even have a 1/4 inch go off of that over to somewhere else.
But you wouldn't want to just poke a hole in it with the poker. You would want to put a
emitter. Yeah, you would want to get whatever size emitter you want, but 1 gallon per hour emitter, if that's the much water. Poke a hole and then put the emitter in.
Could you grab a 1 gallon emitter? Just because somebody wants to see it.
This is a 1 gallon per hour emitter by Rainbird, and then these ones are nice. The very first drip we did a.
Can't see your face.
Okay. The very first drip system we did was like a kit from Home Depot, and it was Dig products, and it was okay, but the big difference when you get the Rainbird and the Netafim is the stuff goes together a lot easier and it works better. So I would suggest, instead of getting a kit at Home Depot or one of the box stores, go to a sprinkler supply. We like Chad's sprinkler if you happen to be in Ogden, but your local sprinkler supply, and try to find somebody there that knows a little something about drip irrigation. I mean, they'll be experts at plumbing and irrigation things, but not everybody knows vegetables, right? But Chad's, for example, they can help you draw up the grid to plan it out and make sure you get all the right pieces.
One other question here.
Sure.
Do you leave the lines in the bed all winter after you drain them?
Yes, we do. Yeah. So once we get this set up, we leave it all year. Yeah, all winter. We make sure we drain them, but then we just leave them right there on the beds. Typically, what happens is then we usually come in later and add compost and leaves and coffee grounds and top it with compost. So I like to pull them up so that they're back on the surface, but you could bury them like we were talking about. But I like to know exactly where their emitters are. And then sometimes I put my transplants right there to make sure that they, when they're little and the roots haven't grown very much, get water. One more minute, if you have more questions, think of them. But one thing I wanted to add is, if you don't know much about Foodscaping Utah, it's a nonprofit organization that helps people get started growing food. So normally we do every Saturday, or not every, but a lot of Saturdays in May, we're at people's homes doing foodscape installations with volunteers. Well, this year we're going to have to limit the numbers with COVID-19, but we're going to try to do some YouTube live, even at homeowners maybe. So you can check on that. We're going to shoot for Saturdays. So hopefully with the drip irrigation class, you got some ideas on how to do that. And if you want to see some hands-on how to build beds and how to grow vegetables, next Saturday, hopefully we can do a raised bed demonstration, and then also build a cattle panel art trellis to grow vertical vegetables on, and you can check that out hopefully next Saturday. We're still working on getting the details and everything lined up. Anybody else have any more questions?
Doesn't look like it. Everybody thought it was good.
Okay, hopefully you got, it's one of those things that you learn by doing too. Hopefully you saw enough to get a good idea on how to lay yours out. But then it's a little bit of a learning process, but just get out there and try to do it, have fun with it, experiment with it.
It's not as hard as it might seem.
It's not as hard as it might seem. The big tip is do it on a hot sunny day, honestly, because like you'll start beating yourself up if the fittings don't go in. Wait for that day and then do it, and do it midday. Drink a lot of water and get it done on that day. Try to have fun with it. Drip irrigation is fantastic. We love it. We save a ton of water. The plants love it. They don't get diseases. We save time. Once you have it set up, you leave it in. This Netafim product, I think they say it will last 20 years. We've had some of ours for 6 and haven't had any trouble. So it's worth the money.
We got one more question.
One more question, okay.
Let's say you have a 5-foot tree, would require how many 1 gallon emitters and about how much time?
5-foot tree.
Let's say I don't know if it's in its first year or.
Okay. So I'll tell you, hopefully this answers your question. Let us know if it didn't. When we first plant our trees, I put 5 1-gallon-per-hour emitters on them. Okay.
Around a circle.
And around what would be called the drip line. Okay, kind of the outer rim. And then if it's a 2nd or 3rd year tree, those years I usually add a few more emitters, but I'm always kind of balancing that with the other trees in the zone, because sometimes we have a 5-year-old tree in the same zone as the 2-year-old tree. Hopefully that makes sense. 5-gallon emitters around is what we start with, and then we add more after that. If it's newly planted, its first year, the tree, its job is to just get established. Okay, so you want to make sure it has water frequently enough. That might mean if it's on a zone that you have everything else watering once a week in July or once every 10 days, you go out with a hose and give it a little extra water.
Right, so 5-gallon emitters for how long?
Oh, for how long? Sorry. Probably 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours.
Once a week?
Once a week in its 2nd year.
Okay.
Twice a week in its 1st year in July. The trees that size probably need, and you can look this up depending on what type of tree it is. If it's a fruit tree, let's say, it might need 15 gallons of water a week in July. Okay. And then so you can think that's 3 hours. But if you water it twice, then you don't have to run it as long. But for fruit trees, I like the run time to be between 2 hours and 3 hours.
Keep in mind that you want to do the first year more.
Keep in mind that it's first year, like if you think about perennials, fruit trees included, its first year, it's really just getting established. Don't expect a lot of growth, right? And then the second year it starts to creep, and then the saying is the third year it leaps. Sleep, creep, and leap, right? Okay, hopefully you learned a lot about drip irrigation. If there aren't any more questions, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. I really appreciate you tuning in, and you know, after the fact, you can, if you think of something, you can comment right on the video if you have other questions. You know, let us know, and yeah, I think that's it, right? Okay, thanks for watching Foodscaping Utah, and grow your own.